Hey everybody, this is your video for the space race between USSR and the USA. It occurred in 1957 to around 1969. That's when we landed on the moon. Some people say it lasted a little longer, so we'll see. So make sure you have a title and date on your paper, and we'll get going. Alright, so what is the space race? Go ahead and jot this part down. The space race was informal competition between the U.S. and USSR. It's not like saying, yo, I'm going to race you to space. And then like USSR was like, game on, let's go. It was not quite that formalized. It was just all a race to become the smartest and the best in getting ourselves into space and to explore the space and send humans to the moon. So the dates, like here, I wrote 57 to 1975 because that's kind of when we stopped landing on the moon and exploring that, but really it's up to debate when it really ended. But this is also known during the Cold War era. So Cold War means no guns, no boots on the ground, fighting people. It's, again, in a more intelligent battle, trying to have information and being the most intelligent country in terms of technology and weaponry and like our abilities. And one more thing I want to point out here, you know who the U.S. is clearly. USSR also went by the name Soviet Union, but then they dissolved at the end of the Cold War, and now we call it Russia. So there's a country that has different names that it goes by. Well, you know, now it's just called Russia, and this is their lovely flag down there. Okay, so here's what all went down. In October 4th, 1957, the USSR launched the first artificial satellite. It was called Sputnik. It was about the size of a basketball, and it orbited the Earth every 98 minutes. And it orbited Earth for a long time. It recently, I believe, went down. I don't remember what year. But it took a long time. And the Sputnik was such a big deal. So make sure you jot down those facts. If you need to pause the video, go ahead. Okay, so here's how people reacted to it. These are Sputnik reactions. USSR is like, woohoo, game on! We totally launched something to go around the Earth. What? USA was like, holy cannoli. We were scared. We were panicked. If they can launch something to go around the Earth, what else can they do? Can they put weapons on it? Can they, like, spy on us? What else can they do? So basically, it motivated us to do more. It motivated us to become smarter and to, dun-da-da-da, we developed NASA. We had people, smart people over there working. We had smart people over here working. Finally, the government's like, let's put all the smarty pantses together. And in 1958, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, was born. All the smarty pants came together, and we put all these rocket scientists in one room, and then decided that we would expand human knowledge of space and improve the usefulness, performance, and safety of the vehicles. The formation of NASA really said that we care about going outer space and that we're going to do this. And we're going to show those Soviets who's boss, right? Before NASA was formed, we didn't look that serious. Okay, so you don't need to write down this slide. This slide is going to talk about, I'm going to highlight a few of the first. There's way more I could highlight, but then you hate it when I make long videos. This is my attempt at making a shorter video. You're welcome very much. So do write this down. This is the first animal in space, and this is a big deal. So after Sputnik, in the same year, in November, they launched a dog, Laika, on Sputnik 11. So they just kept on naming the satellites different numbers afterwards. And this is by the Soviets. Why is it a big deal to put a dog in space? Well, friends, it's because a dog can go in space and it can live, right? So the fact that they took a living animal in space and it survived is a pretty big deal. And that means we might be able to put humans in space and they might be able to live too. And then that's what they did. First human in space. Actually, he's the first human to go around the Earth. He orbited the Earth in 1961. A Soviet guy named Yuri Gagarin on Vostok 1. He orbited the Earth once, and he lived to tell the story. So that was a huge victory for the Soviets. They got the first living creature in space and the first man around the whole Earth. And then we're like, wait, we're smart people too. So in 1961, we were kind of like noticing that they had a guy going around the Earth, and we're like, we can't put a guy around the Earth, but we're going to take a guy, launch him up, and bring him back down. And that's all the technology we had. So on Freedom 7, a capsule that looks like this, a guy was crammed in there named Alan Shepard. Here's his mug down there. He went up in outer space. He went up, came back down. That's all we could handle. And then JFK, a few weeks later, that was the president at the time, he promised by the end of the decade, we're going to send men to the moon. And you know who JFK was, right? John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. So we have this president who was a very young president, a very popular president. Everybody loved him. Well, clearly not everybody, who was assassinated. So many people loved him. And he promised to get people to the moon, and he dies. So you know now America was going to rush and put all their effort and money into the space program to fulfill his legacy. Okay, finally in 1962, a whole year after the Soviets, we got our man to orbit the Earth also. It just took us a while to get that technology up and coming. And our first guy in space was called John Glenn. There's his picture to the right. And he circled the Earth 3 times in about 5 hours. So that was a pretty big deal that we were able to get our American in space also. Okay, for the first woman to orbit, that was also a Soviet. In 1963, her name was Valentina Tereshkova. She spent 3 days in space, actually. Oh, excuse me. So that's a pretty substantial amount of time. And again, her body was able to withstand the uncertainties of space, like the extreme temperatures, the lack of oxygen, the microgravity. Those are big things that people didn't know. Could your heart live through without gravity? Could your lungs breathe when there's no gravity and artificial oxygen pumping through your machines? So a couple years after that, 1965, Alexei Leonov, from a Soviet, he takes about a 10-minute walk outside the Voshko 2. So this is called a spacewalk. It does not indicate any land. It just essentially means he left his space, his satellite, the Voshko 2, and he tethered himself, and he was outside in the extreme conditions of outer space for about 10 minutes. And again, he lived. There's some pretty harsh things in space. So that's awesome that he proved that people can survive outside of a capsule. And that was a pretty big accomplishment the Soviets got. But nothing compared to July 20th, 1969, when 3 men called Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and a third guy. People always forget the third guy, Michael Collins. He was the pilot. He's kind of sort of important there. Those 3 guys actually landed on the moon using the Apollo 11. And it actually took 3 days to fly the moon. So I broke this down for you. You can see the Eagle lander here. This is the Lunar lander. This is not the Apollo. The Apollo is still floating above. So technically Michael Collins never touched the moon because he was in the Apollo the whole time waiting for the boys to come back. So July 16th, 1969, the Apollo 11 is launched from the United States, and it heads towards the moon. July 19th, 1969, the Apollo circles behind the moon, and a third rocket launches it into the moon's orbit. So it establishes an orbit to the moon. It was a big deal to actually go behind the moon. As we talked earlier, there's a side of the moon that never faces the Earth because of the way the moon rotates and revolves the same exact timing. There's always a dark side of the moon. When we went behind the moon, we lost radio contact with these boys, and it was kind of frightening because we don't know what happened to them. For a long time, they were without radio signals because, again, light can't bend, and radio waves are a type of wave that cannot bend because they're a type of light. Finally, July 20th, 1969, the lunar module Eagle lands on the moon. So a section separates from Apollo 11, and the Eagle literally lands on the moon, which is why that famous phrase is, NASA, the Eagle has landed, right? So let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, look at this. This picture here, I know is not the best picture in the world, but hey, it's from the 60s, right? So you got the whole shebang here. And then that's the whole thing. They'll help launch it from the Earth. And then you got the Apollo Command Module. That's where Michael Collins spent his time as the pilot Probably one of the most important positions, but he's the guy who's forgotten because he didn't actually walk on the moon. And then you got the Lunar Excursion Vehicle, also known as the Eagle. So this thing comes out of the Apollo and lands on the moon. They can't land the whole Apollo on there because they don't have enough juice to launch it again. They do have enough to launch one section of this vehicle here, and it will take off like a little bottle cap that'll pop up, and that'll reconnect with the Apollo. So they were really, really precise with this, and this is how they landed on the moon all the times that they did. They used the same sort of system. So, question is, who won? It's a space race. It's a race. So by definition, if they're racing, somebody's winning and somebody's losing. So I want to break it down for you. Okay, so we have all these accomplishments, and we got 2 countries, right? The rest of the world is kind of like sitting back eating popcorn watching it. So the first satellite, it's the Soviets. The first animal which proved things can live in outer space is the Soviets. The first man, which proves that humans can live in outer space, is the Soviets. The first woman, the Soviets. The first thing to go around the Earth, the Soviets. The first person to spacewalk, the Soviets. Technically, they were the first ones actually to fly to the moon too, but they didn't land. They went around the moon, the Soviets. Here's what we did. We landed on the moon, which was ultimately the goal of the space race, is to land on the moon. We also had the first man on the moon. So who won is my question. We did all this stuff. We spent billions of dollars. The Soviets spent billions of dollars. We had people die in this situation where things didn't work well and astronauts lost their lives. Who won? And that's where it's up to you. It's totally up to you to make that decision. But I just want you to recognize with this whole space race talk that we did learn a lot, and a lot of technology was developed from going in outer space. So whether or not you think the Soviets won or whether or not you think the Americans won, a lot was to be learned from our time in the whole space area. Okie dokie, artichokes. Make sure you have detailed notes. This summative you're going to take for this unit is a little different than the other summatives. It's called an essay. Yay! Sounds like fun, right? Good thing is that we want you to provide text evidence, and your text evidence looks like video notes and things like that. So make sure these are up to par, because you will be able to use these on your summative assessment. Huh, what do I spy back there in that picture? Is it a TARDIS? Was the doctor at the moon landing? Shh, I'll never tell. See you later, alligators.